There are moments in life that stop you cold. Not the kind of moments you plan for. Not the ones you rehearse in your mind, or the ones you see coming from a mile away. No. The moments I'm talking about are the quiet ones. The ones that happen in an ordinary hallway, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, when you're just trying to get to your next meeting and the whole world decides to show you something you weren't ready to see. This is one of those stories. Her name was Maria Calloway. She was 26 years old, though most mornings she felt a good deal older than that. She had dark hair that she kept pulled back while she worked, and brown eyes that still held a certain softness in them, even after everything life had handed her. She wore the standard gray uniform of the building's cleaning staff, a collared shirt with a small embroidered logo on the chest, a pair of dark slacks, and sensible shoes that had seen better days. She carried a small cloth tucked into her front pocket, the way her mother had taught her, because her mother always said a person who was prepared for a mess was a person who respected their work. Maria had worked the early morning shift at the Hartwell Tower for almost 2 years. She arrived before most of the office workers, before the coffee carts and the elevator rush and the noise of a busy city day. She liked it that way. The building was peaceful in those early hours, just the hum of the lights, the sound of her cartwheels rolling over marble floors, and the quiet sense that the world had not yet asked too much of her. She cleaned the executive floor last. That was the floor, with the corner offices, and the conference rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kind of carpet that made you feel like you were walking on something that cost more than your monthly rent. She was always careful up there, thorough. She took her time. She did not expect anyone to notice. His name was Daniel Hartwell. He was 53 years old, the kind of man who had earned every gray hair at his temples without apology. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of face that was more honest than handsome. Sharp blue eyes behind a pair of simple wire-rimmed glasses, and a way of carrying himself that said he had been raised to take things seriously without taking himself too seriously. He wore a navy suit that morning, a white shirt, no tie yet. He was always the first one in. Daniel had built Hartwell Consulting from a 2-person operation in a rented office above a dry cleaner to a firm with 400 employees and clients across the country. He was not the kind of man people expected to be warm. CEOs of that size rarely were, but the people who had worked with him long enough knew that beneath the calm exterior and the careful decisions, there was a man who still remembered where he came from, who still called his mother every Sunday, who still kept a photograph on his desk of himself at age 12, fishing with his grandfather on a lake in Vermont, because he never wanted to forget that the best things in life had nothing to do with the square footage of your office. That morning, he had come in early to review some contracts before a 7 o'clock call. He poured himself a cup of coffee in the small kitchen on the executive floor, and he was on his way back to his office when he turned the corner near the conference room. And he stopped. Maria was cleaning the windows. She was standing with her back partly to him, stretching up to reach the top of the glass, and the early morning light coming through the window caught her face at an angle that made it impossible to miss. The bruises. There were 2 of them, one beneath her left eye, deep purple shading into green at the edges, the kind that told you it was a few days old, another along her cheekbone, tender-looking even from across the room. She had done her best to conceal them, a little makeup carefully applied, but the light does not lie, and in that moment the light was telling a story that no amount of concealer could fully hide. Daniel stood there. He did not say anything right away. He was a man who had learned over 53 years of living that the first thing you feel is not always the right thing to act on. So he stood there for a moment with his coffee cup in his hand, and he breathed, and he thought about what it meant to be a person who saw something like this and had to decide what kind of person they were going to be in the next 30 seconds. Maria heard him. She turned, and for just a moment, just one brief, unguarded moment, he saw the flicker of something cross her face. Not fear exactly, more like the particular exhaustion of someone who has been seen when they were trying very hard not to be, the look of a person who has gotten very good at managing other people's reactions to their pain. She lowered her arm. She straightened her back. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell," she said, Her voice was steady, professional. She had a voice like that, the kind that had been trained by necessity to reveal nothing. "Good morning," he said, and then there was a pause. Not an awkward pause. Not the kind that needed to be filled right away. It was the kind of pause that both of them understood, in some quiet, unspoken way, to be necessary. Like the moment before a song really begins, when the room goes still and you know something is about to matter. He set his coffee cup down on the small credenza beside him. "I'm sorry to interrupt your work," he said. "Would you mind if I asked you something?" She looked at him carefully, measuring. "Of course not. Are you all right?" 3 words, simple ones. The kind of words that, when asked by the right person in the right tone at the right moment, can undo every careful thing a person has built around themselves to get through the day. Maria blinked. She opened her mouth, and for a moment it seemed like she was going to say what she always said, what she had been saying for months to anyone who looked too long, that she was fine, that she'd bumped into something, that it looked worse than it felt. All the small practiced deflections that had become as automatic to her as breathing. But something in his face stopped her. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He wasn't looking at her with the wide, uncomfortable eyes of someone who didn't know what to do with what they were seeing. He was just looking at her, directly, calmly, the way her grandfather used to look at her when she was small and upset about something, with the quiet patience of a person who had all the time in the world and absolutely no judgment to spare. "I've been better," she said finally. He nodded, just once, slowly. "I thought so," he said. "Do you want to sit down for a minute?" They sat in the conference room, not across the long table the way executives and clients sat. They pulled 2 chairs away from it and faced each other near the window, with the city beginning to light up below them and the coffee he'd gone to refill sitting warm between her hands. She didn't tell him everything. Not that morning. She was not the kind of person who opened all the way up to someone she barely knew, and he was not the kind of person who asked her to. He simply sat with her. He asked gentle questions when it felt right, and he stayed quiet when it didn't. He listened the way that very few people listen, not planning his next response, not searching for a solution, just genuinely, fully there. She told him enough, that she was living with someone who had a bad temper, that she had told herself it would get better, that she had been telling herself that for a while now, and that she was beginning to understand, in the slow and difficult way that understanding sometimes comes, that it was not going to get better on its own. He listened. When she was finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something she had not expected. "My mother left my father when I was 9 years old," he said. "It took her 11 years. 11 years of telling herself the same thing you just told me. And I watched every one of those years, and I want you to know something." He paused. "The hardest day of her life was the day she left, and the second hardest was the day after that. But she used to tell me later when I was old enough to understand. She used to say that the day she decided she was worth more than what she was living with was the day her real life began." Maria looked at him. Her eyes were bright. Not crying, not quite, but close. "She sounds like a strong woman," Maria said quietly. "She was," he said. "She worked in a building like this one. Maintenance crew. 2 kids, no savings, no plan. Just a decision." He smiled just slightly. "She retired with a pension, a house she owned outright, and more grandchildren than she could keep track of." He picked up his coffee. "I'm telling you this not to tell you what to do. That's your life and your choice, and I'd never presume otherwise. I'm telling you because I want you to know that the ending doesn't have to look like the beginning." What happened next is the part that people talked about for a long time afterward. Not because it was dramatic, not because anything shocking occurred in the Hollywood sense of the word, but because in a world that had grown so accustomed to people looking away, what Daniel Hartwell did was quietly, simply extraordinary. He called his HR director that same morning and asked, without naming names, what resources the company had available for employees dealing with difficult home situations. He was told about the Employee Assistance Program, counseling, emergency housing referrals, legal resources. Services that had been in place for years but that almost no one on the cleaning staff had ever been told about. He asked why. The answer was uncomfortable. The information had always been distributed through department email chains, and the contracted cleaning crew wasn't included in those chains because they were technically employed through a third party. He asked for that to be corrected immediately. Then he asked his assistant to reach out to Maria. Not summoning her to an office, not making a formal thing of it, but simply leaving a note with the building directory of resources, and with it, a handwritten line that said, "You are valued here. Please use whatever you need." She found the note tucked under the handle of her cleaning cart that afternoon. She stood in the hallway and read it twice. Then she folded it carefully, the way you fold something you intend to keep. The weeks that followed were not easy. The truth is, they rarely are. Life doesn't become simple just because someone shows you a kindness. There were hard days and harder nights. There were moments when Maria second-guessed herself, and moments when she felt more afraid than she had words for. But she made the call. She talked to someone. She found a path forward that was hers. She did not leave quietly or all at once, but she left. And on the other side of that decision, she found something she had almost forgotten how to believe in: herself. Daniel didn't make a big announcement about what he'd done. He didn't post about it or bring it up in meetings. That wasn't who he was. He simply made sure the systems in his building worked for everyone in it, and he went back to his work. But sometimes, on his way in on early mornings, he would see Maria in the hallway. And she would look at him, and he would nod, and she would nod back. There are whole conversations that happen without a single word. This was one of them. 6 months later, Maria enrolled in a part-time program at the community college. She was studying business administration. She wasn't sure exactly where it would lead, but her mother had always told her that the first step didn't need to know about the last one. You just had to take it. She still worked the morning shift at Hartwell Tower. She liked it. She liked the quiet of the early hours, the way the light came through the windows, the sense of purpose in a job done well. She liked the people. The security guard who always had a kind word, the woman at the coffee cart who remembered her order, the CEO who sometimes arrived before anyone else and always said good morning like he meant it. She kept the note in her wallet, not because she needed it anymore, but because there are some things worth carrying with you. Reminders that one person paying attention on one ordinary morning can change the direction of a life. If there's something this story wants to leave with you, it isn't complicated. It doesn't take a grand gesture. It doesn't take money or power or a corner office. It takes what Daniel Hartwell had on that Tuesday morning, which was simply the willingness to stop, to look, to ask, and to mean it. We are all moving quickly through our days. There are always emails to answer and calls to return and meetings that started 5 minutes ago. But every now and then, the world puts something in front of us that asks us to slow down, to choose, in the smallest possible way, to be human. And those moments, quiet as they are, ripple outward in ways we will never fully know. Maria knows. She thinks about it sometimes when she's studying late at night at the kitchen table of the small apartment that is hers and hers alone. She thinks about a man with a coffee cup and a steady gaze and 3 simple words. Are you all right? 3 words. That's all it took. Think about the people in your life who might be waiting for someone to ask. Think about the quiet mornings, the long hallways, the light that catches something you weren't supposed to see. And then choose to be the kind of person who stops, because you might not ever know what that moment becomes for someone else. But I promise you this, it becomes everything.